Hey guys, and welcome to the newest episode of Be Hero Presents the Bump Card Wrestling Podcast. I am your host, as always, Brian, and with me tonight is my tag partner, Psycho. How you doing tonight, Psycho?
I'm doing good. Feels like we haven't recorded in a while.
That it does. Between moving my set around and wrestling stuff and everything else, it's been hard. Which I do apologize, guys. You know, we have to kind of work around wrestling schedules and things like that for all of this. But all in all, we are here and we are ready, and I'm excited for this episode. I don't know about you.
There's a lot to dive into for sure.
Yes, there is. So, on this episode, guys, we are going to actually talk about and review Netflix's McMahon documentary. Mr. McMahon, specifically, is the name of the documentary. If you haven't seen it, I suggest to go watch it before listening to this and come back. That way, we don't spoil anything. Well, welcome back for all of those who decided to come back after. We're going to go ahead and do that shortly. But first, as we always do, we're going to go ahead and talk about the wrestling world news. So, Nikki, hit us off with that news.
Okay, so I think one of the biggest news stories that broke recently, AEW and Warner Brothers Discovery has signed a new multi-year deal. That's pretty interesting. Reports are saying that AEW will receive upwards of $150 million per year. And so Dynamite will remain on TBS, Collision will remain on TNT. No mention of Rampage, which is interesting.
For all signs, I heard that they're quietly canceling Rampage like they did with Dark.
That's what I heard too. Which would make sense, by the way, if the rumored replacement for the show, I don't know if you heard this, but I think it's, gosh, I'm trying to think of the name of it. Is it Shockwave? I think it's Shockwave. AEW Shockwave. They trademarked the name, and so people are speculating that that's going to be a new show.
Why? You can't do one show good, so why did the other?
Well, the rumor is that they're trying to negotiate that to be on one of Fox's channels, but we shall see if that comes to be. But getting back to the Warner Brothers Discovery deal, the other thing that's thrown in there is that in addition to those shows airing on TBS and TNT, both programs will be simulcast on the streaming service Max, and they'll be available on demand as of January 2025. So, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, I'm excited. I think it's a good way of kind of making you feel like that number two again, because AEW kind of was sliding in that way that TNA had done, where they were sliding downwards and didn't really feel like a quality number two. This kind of makes me feel like it's going to be. I also heard that part of the deal with this is also involving Bleacher Report and Max as well, which is going to allow people to have the pay-per-views on Max through Bleacher Report, because Bleacher Report already has a deal with Max. So, and I'm hoping so, because that means I don't have to pay for pay-per-views anymore.
Well, I heard that they're not going to give the pay-per-views away for free, that it'll be discounted to Max subscribers.
It's still better than right now, like $60 every month.
Yeah. So even with a discount, if you've got Max already, then that's going to be a good deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I mean, that's a lot of money coming in. It should help. I mean, honestly, AEW is definitely not going to die with that kind of money being pumped into it. For the foreseeable future. So good. I think that's good news for wrestling in general.
I agree.
Hopefully hopefully they'll be able to turn it around. They have good shows and there's good ideas occasionally. They just need to make some tweaks and changes. Hopefully they will. Yeah, we shall see. The other thing is, so NXT, WWE NXT, debuted on the CW network this past week, and by all accounts, it did a pretty great rating. Over 800,000 people.
That's really high for NXT, actually.
Yeah, it's like way higher than their last show they did on USA.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think part of that, though, if I'm being honest, is due to intrigue. It's a new show, right? So they obviously, a lot of people tuned in because it always starts high. Like even when Dynamite, AEW Dynamite, their first episode, a lot of people tuned in and it hasn't really gotten back to that height. So we'll see. I guess the real test will be to see if it can withstand or sustain that viewership. But by all accounts, it was a good show. I haven't watched it, but
I watched it. It was actually a really good show. There were some matches that were technically a little sloppy, but the crowd was really into it. The quality of the stuff was really good. They actually went full bore for the production on this too. They pulled out the 4K cams like they usually do for the pay-per-views for this. So it was high quality. You got to see a very slight, small Degeneration X reunion.
Yeah. Yep. I did see that. I did see that part. So.
So all in all, it was good. I'd like to see it continue with everything. I think they have that ability to do so. And honestly, I think having NXT as your nationally televised show and then slowly working both SmackDown and Raw to streaming is the smart way to go, because you get the people's intrigue to see these new people on there and get national recognition, and then you're having them go pay for Netflix to go and see the bigger names.
Yeah, I mean, all of this is good for pro wrestling in general. I think more viewership. I think another part of NXT drawing such a good rating is because it is on technically network television, and so there's probably a larger viewership than households that get USA. So, and then also Monday Night Raw. They have aired their last 3-hour Raw, at least through the end of the year till they're on Netflix. Who knows what happens there? But last 3-hour Raw, and it's going to be going to 2 hours. Starting this upcoming Monday. It's interesting because I think it's interesting to see how they structure their 2-hour show. If they're going to, make it more focused on the big names, or if there's still going to be filler and there's going to be a lot of guys left off the show. I don't know. I think honestly the show is going to be better at a 2-hour program because there is going to be less filler. There won't be time for filler.
Yep. I'm excited. Sometimes watching Raw, and I know you don't always watch the weeklies, but sometimes watching Raw feels like an event you have to be watching the whole time. Because you don't know what's going on, but two, it literally feels like you're doing 3 hours, where you don't want that. Like, you don't want that in a movie, you don't want that in a show. You want it to feel like, oh my gosh, it's already done.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, at 2 hours, it's far more likely that I might catch more episodes than when it was at 3 hours. It's just, that's a lot of, there's so much wrestling on television now. If, as a kid, I would have loved this. I would have been watching wrestling every night, even as a teenager, you know. But
But
I.
most of the time right now in my home, when we're out sitting down to dinner, we are watching either wrestling or football. That's one of the two things that's on our TV almost all the time. And we actually been watching a lot more college football because my wife's cousin plays for Hawaii. So we even watch football on Saturdays. So almost every day of the week, there's something for us to be watching at this time between football and wrestling, because we watch also TNA for the most part. So yeah, it's insane the gluttony of wrestling that we have available to us.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing for variety purposes, I guess. But yeah, my attention span as I've gotten older has been, I can't consume long shows like I used to, or long periods of watching wrestling. I do keep up with a lot of wrestling, but I watch it in clips. Like I saw the NXT Open with Shawn Michaels and Triple H. I saw that. I believe that I saw something with CM Punk this week.
There was two big things. So they had on Raw, they had the last conversation inside of the Hell in a Cell between him and McIntyre, and then also on NXT, he was also the special guest referee in the main event between Ethan Page and Trick Williams. So,
they're using CM Punk a lot to boost ratings, and that could be another reason why NXT drew such a big rating.
And you avoid bringing him up because I knew you were going to be all over that.
That's where they got 800,000 people. So that's the boost. We'll see if they can maintain it without Punk on the show next week.
Do you ask nicely, or do you just push AJ out of the way to get on top of that dick?
I don't know. I don't even know how to answer that. I'm trying to think of something clever to say in response, and I've got nothing. So no, I mean, I might push Punk out of the way to get to AJ, but who knows?
Agreed. Anyhow.
Yeah. With that in mind, let's get into the McMahon stuff because there's a lot to cover. We're going to attempt to tackle 6 episodes of this. Now, I think this is the way we should do this, Brian. Instead of like doing like a recap of every episode and like everything that happened, I think we should go over, and we might jump around a little bit, but I think we should cover some of the like the interesting pieces from each episode. I mean, obviously, like the first episode really focused on like McMahon's upbringing, how he got into the business, the relationship with his father. I found, I've heard a lot of talk since the McMahon stuff came out here, or the McMahon documentary. There's really 2 sides that I've heard. I've heard that it was just fluff and no new information and whatnot. There's that camp. And I can somewhat see their point. If you're a diehard wrestling fan, most of this stuff isn't really too much of a revelation, right? However, the other thing to keep in mind is this isn't necessarily for the hardcore wrestling fan. It's on Netflix, which is reaching a new audience. So it at times it seemed more like a history of the WWE because they covered things that had nothing to do really with McMahon, like they could have left out. We'll touch on that a little bit, but
and then Paul Heyman actually nails it in this. Of that specifically is that McMahon doesn't have his fingers in the wrestling business, that the wrestling business has its fingers all inside of McMahon. Like that's exactly what it is. That's why telling these stories of what's going on in the wrestling business from all of the controversies and Monday Night Wars and everything on is so involved with McMahon because the wrestling business has its mitts all over McMahon and who he is as a person.
Yeah, I mean, really, the wrestling business is, or at least was, Vince McMahon's life, right? Like he valued his business even over family, as we would see in different things. But there were some things that wasn't necessarily a revelation of like, wow, I didn't know that. But hearing it from McMahon's perspective, or hearing it from, maybe, others that they interviewed's perspective, it's a different take or a different viewpoint on everything that we already know. And
Except for Tony Atlas just hated on everything.
Well, he was very positive on McMahon, though.
No, he was not.
No, he was not. He said he would. Well, at the end, he says he's the greatest wrestling promoter of all time.
Well, okay, yes, he did say that, but there was a lot. So there's like some stuff where like people are like, "Oh yeah, I couldn't see McMahon do that. I couldn't see McMahon do that." Tony Atlas was like, "I could totally see him do that," kind of thing. Like, that was the attitude on the several aspects when people were asking him questions.
Let's talk about Tony Atlas here, though, because does that not seem like the most random person they could have gotten to be, that they could have got to be in this documentary to talk? Like, and the fact that he didn't just have like a small part in it, like he basically was on every episode. Like he talked almost like he had almost as much airtime as Dave Meltzer, right? It was
Meltzer was a ton. Like this is almost a Meltzer documentary as much as Meltzer was in this.
It was just interesting that it's like Tony Atlas, really, like that was the only like obscure star that they really included. They had the big stars and stuff like that, but
I wouldn't call him obscure lately, honestly, especially when it comes to documentaries, because he's in a lot of the dark side of the ring stuff. So
that is true.
Though this is more pointing to the very, very casual fan who's not going to know who Tony Atlas is. Mm-hmm. For anyone that's wanting to watch a documentary, and if you base your opinions on like dark side of the ring, Tony Atlas is a fantastic choice to pick from that.
Yeah, you know who I would have liked to have seen in this instead of Tony Atlas? Because Tony Atlas, I bet you they threw him a Big Mac in a thing of fries, and he was like, "I'm in." It's like they probably got him. The reason they got him is because he included himself for very cheap. Yeah, like if I'm being honest, but I would have liked to have seen somebody like Jake the Snake Roberts, on this, telling his, chiming in on some of these stories, somebody like that.
Still under contract with AEW. And it's still, even though it's a documentary, it's still a WWE produced product.
Well, kind of. They don't have final say on it. Netflix did.
Yeah, but it's still involved with it, and like you didn't see anybody from any other camp.
I mean, Meltzer's pretty close, but as much as he shills AEW, he's pretty close.
Yeah.
No, I guess that's true. Is Jake still with AEW?
Yeah, he still does stuff with AEW. Still from AEW and ROH.
Or maybe they could have had. Gosh, I'm trying to think of somebody. I don't know. Like they're. Who wasn't included that they completely glossed over that was a big part that should have been in there. And I hate to say this, but Vince Russo. How do you tell the Attitude Era and all of that and not mention Vince Russo once? Like,
but they also didn't do what's his name? Oh my gosh, my brain just turned off on his name.
Jim Cornette?
That's the one.
Yeah, I mean it's like they were on the writing team, and everything like that. I mean, they had freaking Brian Grewitz, on there, who you didn't even know until I mentioned, that he was a writer for the WWE at one point, and he now writes. He's basically like, he writes a lot of the Rock's material.
Yeah.
But they've got him on there, but they don't even mention Vince Russo. How do you mention the Austin 316 thing and the rise of all of that and not mention Vince Russo? I think, like, if I was Russo, I'd be very upset at that. I'd be like, how are you telling this without that? And if they even included him as an interview piece on this, can you imagine what he could have said about Vince that would have been interesting? I mean, he worked really closely with them during that whole Attitude Era thing. And he could have lended a lot of insight on a lot of these stories.
I think that is also part of it too, because every person that was on here was definitely in McMahon's camp for the most part. Tony Atlas may be the outlier on that, but
Dave Meltzer.
Again, Meltzer put McMahon over like crazy.
I mean, he also told the other side about how it's like there weren't 93,000 people at WrestleMania 3. He was on that side of things and calling them liars on that.
Well, I mean, yeah, he's still gonna have like a bit there, but like he wasn't burying McMahon as much as he could have. I feel like Russo could have easily done so.
He could have.
It was what's his name? Moffat, or not Moffat? The reporter whose name I can't think of.
Wait, what story?
Well, the one that, not the single story, but all of the stories. So the one that would always be writing about like the WWE and McMahon and all the stuff. He kind of helped bring the steroid thing together.
I can't. Shoemaker.
Shoemaker. The Shoemaker. Not start with an M, but like Meltzer, but something else. But I guess it could be wrong. I can't remember. I watched it like late last week. So I can't think of his name. But he was heavily in it, and he was the only one like throwing shade on McMahon and the WWE at all during this thing.
Oh no, you're talking about. Oh my gosh, you're talking about Phil Mushnick.
Mushnick, yes. It was started with an M.
Yes, Shoemaker was in there too, but yeah that was different. But yeah, Phil Mushnick
throwing like shade like crazy.
Well, yeah. Did you? I remember. During that time period, and he didn't just write for the New York Post. He would write for TV Guide, the magazine. For our younger viewers, they used to actually put out a magazine, TV Guide, that would have articles, and it would have, basically the schedule. It would be a guide of what's on television, right? What's that? Yeah, you had a few.
I said a guide, if you will, of TV.
I don't know, like, why I heard that in like Jerry Seinfeld's voice, but that's kind of how I heard that. Yeah, he was writing for that, and he would every week he would have something derogatory to say about WWE. And I remember reading that, and being like, this guy really has it out for them.
Right.
So I think it was interesting that they included him. He definitely not in McMahon's camp.
No, but he was really the only one I felt like that. Like even Meltzer, like for the most part, was in the McMahon camp, or WWE in general. His camp.
And Tony Atlas, you said.
And Tony Atlas for the Tony Atlas literally felt like a guy who's going to tell you all of the stories he has heard. Mm-hmm. Not maybe once he knows, but once he's heard.
Right. Another one that had, Bruce Pritchard was basically just a shill for McMahon on the thing. He was like a very much a defender, and I do have to mention that most of these interviews were recorded before the allegations came out and before McMahon stepped down.
95% of them were in 2022. That is only the last episode where they did 6 or 7. The people that they talked about or did interviews with that were more recent.
Yeah, it was. So a lot of it, it's like, of course they weren't going to be negative to McMahon at the time. So you can kind of throw that out, because if you watch it, like, I can't believe they're putting over McMahon. Well, it was all most of it was recorded before anything happened, and most of them were still employed by McMahon, or or under contract to McMahon. Since it's independent contractors.
I know we haven't gotten there yet, but I want to bring this up because it's in my mind and it just makes me laugh. At one point during that, McMahon talks about the territory days and when he takes over, and that the old school promoters of the territory days, and including his father, got really upset with him taking the top talent and then running that top talent in the territories he just bought them from, because they were already made established names, right? And then later on, when they're talking about the Monday Night Wars, and WCW does ostensibly the same thing from McMahon. McMahon talks about how like that was backstabbing and cold and just not how your things are done. And then the narrator, I guess the person doing the interview, asks McMahon, he's like, well, how's that any different than what you did with the territory days? He goes, it's just totally different.
It's different because it was him, right? Because it was flipped. Eric Bischoff, even, who he mentioned that about, it's like, of course that's exactly what they did, but McMahon played the victim, and like, oh, they're rating our talent and everything, which is exactly what he did in the territories, to all the territories, and put them out of business. So it was really interesting how he doesn't see it that way, or at least he won't admit, to doing the same thing.
Yep. And it's quite interesting because he brings up these crazy stories or talks about things, and then he conveniently forgets other stuff during this thing. It's like, that's not how I remember it happening. I don't remember this person. Da 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 da. Like, so interesting. One I didn't know about, and I don't know how I ever didn't realize it was a thing, was the Richter screw job.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know that one at all. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, there were aspects of it that seemed familiar, but like I didn't know nothing of it when it happened. I mean, I was before my time per se, but
yeah. And Wendy Richter, who they interviewed for it, she wasn't in McMahon's camp.
No,
on that. I was
one episode.
I think she was in 2 episodes, because I think they talked about her, with the Cyndi Lauper stuff earlier, and then the screw job.
Yeah, they did the WrestleMania and then the screw job episode.
I found it really interesting that they basically showed, the footage of Fabulous Moolah as this, spider lady or whatever she was called, where she was masked, and I had actually never seen the actual footage of where she, they screwed Wendy Richter. I had heard about it. I'd seen like clips, but not the actual finish. So that was really cool to see.
Yep.
And that's something a casual viewer would have no idea about. I mean, you said yourself, you didn't know.
Nope.
And I do wish that they would have dived more into his childhood a little bit further, or his relationship with his father, because they kind of did. Like, they talked later on about like abuse from his other father, his stepdad or whatever, and even to mention abuse from his mother, and things like that. But they didn't get too in depth there. But I guess that's to be somewhat expected, because Vince basically started the documentary by saying that he wasn't going to tell all the real stories, right? He was like, oh no, he's like, oh, if you only knew the real stories. And then the narrator was like, well, tell the real stories. What are the real stories? He's like, oh no, I can tell you enough to make it interesting, but I'm not going to tell you everything, which I hate. It's like, come on.
Yeah,
And now we'll never know.
no. I was gonna say there was no way even back then that he was gonna get anything really out of McMahon, because it's a thing of control, right? McMahon has to be in control, and doing that kind of thing makes it so that he stays in control. That's just who McMahon is.
I hate to say it, but like serial killers do the same thing, right? It's like if you've ever like listened to a serial killer's interview, they very much do the same thing. It's all about control for them.
So let me start by saying that I am not a psychologist or a psychologist.
Me neither. Although I did, I was Dr. Psycho, but
yeah. He played one on TV.
Yes.
But if you look at the DSM-5, I would almost guarantee that McMahon hits a lot of the signs of being a classic psychopath because of the way he does not give or show proper emotion. Like people talked about during this, right? The way he has a little regret for right and wrong, the way he manipulates and treats people. Like he would definitely be probably, again, not a psychologist or psychiatrist, but I would say he's probably got psychopathic tendencies. And you see that in a lot of the things he does, and a lot of the way he treats people, family included.
At the very least, like sociopath, or narcissist for sure.
Oh yeah, narcissist for sure. But yeah, he hits all those hallmarks, I think. So any psychologists or psychiatrists that want to do a case study on McMahon, let us know.
Yeah, we'd love to have you on the podcast to talk about it. Yeah, for sure. So like obviously, they tell the story about how Vince bought the WWE or WWF at the time from his dad, and how if he bounced one check, or he didn't, if he missed one payment, then it would go back to his father. And I knew that story before, but it also that's the same deal I had with Brick and Carey with ACW.
Oh yeah.
When I sold it to Brick and Carey, there was a thing in the contract basically that said if they missed a payment to me, then I would get ACW back, and they'd be out that money. So there was a time, I just have to tell the story. It's always good to get insights on this. There was a time where they almost missed a payment, and Carrie was like, well, we can get it to you, later on or something. And I said, nah, I was like, the contract says you missed a payment, it's coming back to me. He had me get in the car. He drove. This is day of one of their shows. He drove to the bank to get the money out to get to me. So, like, because he was like, no, we're not having it reversed. Almost happened though. Almost happened. I don't know if I've ever told that story. Definitely not on the podcast.
Nope.
So, but I laughed at that story from Vince because I was like, oh, that's very similar. Very similar. And then of course, they talk about Vince basically raiding, all the talent and getting them to come over. They talk about Hogan and how they got Hogan, and Hogan was already a made man, like with the Rocky movie, and then with the AWA, and they got him to come over and be the star. One thing I didn't really know, I'm not sure, but that they had thought about making Dusty Rhodes that guy.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how different things would be if Dusty Rhodes was main eventing the first WrestleMania? Or, you know, I don't even. I mean, he could have done it. I don't know if it would have been as big as Hogan, though.
I don't know. It'd be hard to say because Dusty's charisma
Mm-hmm.
is different totally than Hogan's. Hogan was essentially made to be a not only a superhero but a child's superhero. I don't really see that for Dusty. Dusty seems like the guy that would have been made to be the superhero for people from Chicago, right? He's a big dude that has a lot of loving to give. And that's the kind of person I see in Dusty. Don't get me wrong, Dusty was fantastic. One of the greatest wrestlers, if like in the top 5 of the greatest wrestlers of all time. But I don't see him being the guy to carry the company in that same way. Like, I don't see the WWE being the cereal box, being the cartoons, or having the toys and everything else that made it blow up as much as it did with Dusty.
You know what would have been different, though? If they had went with Dusty, I don't know that you get the WWF that was so focused on bodies and the, you know, the almost the oh my gosh, the bodybuilding type, you know, bodies and stuff, because Dusty didn't have that body,
No, he's
you
not.
know. And so I think, you know, they probably still could have marketed it, you know, had him on cereal boxes and stuff and done that, but it would have been very different. You know, it wouldn't have been the land of the giants type thing. WrestleMania would have been very different. So yeah, very, very different. And they probably wouldn't have gotten, you know, the whole steroid thing probably wouldn't have happened with Dusty, you know, as the main guy.
Yeah.
So very interesting there. And then I wish they would have. I mean, you can only pack so much into 6 episodes, but I wish they would have went into Black Monday. You know about that? They did a Dark Side of the Ring on it. I wish they would have went in that, but at the same time, there's been documentaries on that already. So same with the Monday Night Wars later on. It's like they've done that to death, so they didn't need to spend so much time on that. But yeah, the first episode was basically from his childhood up to WrestleMania. The first WrestleMania and how that all came to be. I will say that some interesting things that were on there was like how basically him and Linda McMahon, you know, gotten together basically when they were, you know, I believe like he was one of them was
or something like that.
It was like 13 and 16 or something like that. I forget the exact ages, but I had no idea that they were together for, you know, that long.
I always felt like they were like college boyfriend girlfriend.
Yeah, or maybe even like, I don't know. I never knew their story though. I never knew their story as far as that goes. I was actually surprised a little bit to see Linda talk a little bit on the documentary, because like she's, you know, had a falling out with Vince for a while.
But they've been still married. Like, even I think they're still married even now.
Yeah, but they've been separate. They haven't lived together in, you know, I don't even know how long.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been separated for years, apparently. But yeah, so that was interesting. That stuff we hadn't really heard before, so that was new stuff. Episode 2 was kind of interesting. It was titled Heat, and they went a little bit into the the second WrestleMania, they talked about Jesse Ventura and the how he attempted to get a union
Yep.
going. And what was interesting about this was at the time Hulk Hogan had denied ever going to Vince McMahon and stooging off Ventura, but here in the documentary he fully admitted it.
Yep.
Which is very interesting. Ventura would have been a good one to have on this, to have his viewpoints on some of this stuff. That would have made for good TV. But yeah,
bring Ventura back, right, to do nothing for Saturday Night's Main Event.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. By the way, bringing back Saturday Night's Main Event.
Yep.
I hope they go full nostalgia with it, like have the old intros, and the music, and Ventura doing commentary.
Yep.
That'll be interesting. That's a big deal too for professional wrestling in WWE. Those specials on NBC.
Right. It makes me feel nostalgic, though. Sadly, and sad that we don't have Gorilla Monsoon.
Yeah. Speaking of Gorilla Monsoon, though, they did mention how he was originally in line to be the successor to Vince McMahon's father, Vince Sr., to own the WWF. And Vince tells a story about how there was always a tension between him and Gorilla Monsoon, because Gorilla saw Vince as competition. Mm-hmm. And Vince says, and he should have. which was very interesting. I wished Monsoon was alive so we could have gotten his perspective now on that, because we never really, shoot interviews weren't really a thing at the time. Yeah. And so we never got to hear Gorilla Monsoon tell these inside stories of all of that and how he felt being employed by McMahon for all those years. That would have been interesting. It's too bad. So then, they go into WrestleMania 2. They talk about how, where it was in multiple arenas. And Vince basically saying, we'll never do that again because it did not work. And then we move to WrestleMania 3. And of course, there's the dispute with Dave Meltzer and all of them about how many fans were actually in attendance. However many it actually was, whether it was 93,000, whether or not it was 78,000, it was still a lot of people.
Yes.
So, to kind of argue about how many there actually were, does it really matter this many years later? I mean, it looked like a lot of people. It was a lot of people, especially for the time. Mm-hmm. Nobody was doing crowds like that. If you just watch WrestleMania 3, it's amazing and surreal sight to see that many people in an arena or in a stadium, to watch professional wrestling.
Yeah. And it wasn't even just wrestling wasn't doing that kind of numbers, just in general. There are very few events of any variety. Maybe the Super Bowl, but even that's a maybe, that would be pulling in that kind of numbers. Even at 78,000.
Yeah. Yeah. So of course you get a lot of the same stuff we've heard that I do think is exaggerated of Hogan, and Andre, about how Hogan didn't know if Andre was, who was going to win the match, if Andre was going to go through with it. Here's what I think actually happened, because, a lot of people call bull crap on that, that he didn't know. I believe that the finish was laid out and that Hogan just didn't know, because if Andre had changed his mind, who was going to stop him? Right. There was always the possibility, and I do think that Andre, being Andre, probably leaned into that a little bit, and made Hogan nervous and second guess it all the way up until it actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
I could totally see Andre, like, if I'm going to pass the torch, he's going to earn it. I'm not going to make it easy for him. So I could see that. And maybe from Hogan's point of view, he might have thought that Andre was serious and that, who knows who's going to win. But of course, Andre wasn't going to go into business for himself. He was a professional, especially on a show of that magnitude.
Yeah.
Okay, so then, let's see here. We have, they jump all the way to WrestleMania 6, which, and they talk about no holds barred. So they jump they jump a few years here, which is interesting that no mention of Randy Savage here yet. So they jump past him as champion and all of that. But they talk about no holds barred and how they had to rewrite the script, and they locked them. Hogan and Vince locked themselves in basically a hotel, and for days and rewrote the script. Because Hogan was going to go off to Hollywood, and Vince basically was like, "No, we'll make a movie for you, to keep you from going to Hollywood." As if that's the same thing. It's like, oh, you want to go be a Hollywood star and be a legit, actor? Well, we can write you a movie, which seems bizarre.
Yeah, a movie that consists of a line that says, "I made Dookie."
Yeah, what's that smell? What's funny? If you watch that and hear, when Hogan says that, what's that smell? You can totally, at least for me, I can totally hear that in Vince McMahon's voice. Like, that was totally written by that part. 100%, I believe, was written by Vince McMahon, because you can hear him coaching Hogan on that, and then you're gonna pick him up and you're gonna sniff around and you're gonna go, "What's that smell?" That's totally Vince. And then Dookie, of course, Vince is obsessed with that, so he has to write that into the script. That was 100% a Vince call.
Totally.
And the movie didn't do very good. Although, when it came out as a kid, I was super psyched to go see it. I didn't watch it in theaters. I don't think anybody did, because it bombed terribly. But I did rent the VHS tape. And it was entertaining for me as a kid, because I didn't know any better. I didn't know what a good movie was. And then we get to WrestleMania 6, and basically they talk about the passing of the torch to Warrior. And yeah, Warrior didn't cut it, basically. They talk a little bit about Sergeant Slaughter and how they got some backlash for putting the title on Slaughter.
Yeah.
During the war. Desert Storm.
Yep.
They could have dived into this a little bit more. Slaughter would have been a good person to have on here to have that. But Bob Costas was also on this.
Oh yeah, a lot.
Yeah, so that was an interesting perspective. I wouldn't necessarily say he was in Vince's camp.
Yeah, but he didn't also
he didn't bury him completely. I do want to say, though, that it actually really surprised me. After the first few episodes, I was really surprised. I thought that this was going to be not as nice as it was to McMahon. It seemed like it was a very positive piece for the first couple of episodes.
I up to the last episode, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, there were some things that they mentioned that weren't painting him in the positive light, but they could have went way harder on him. They let him off easy on a lot of it.
There's a lot of stuff that you couldn't possibly paint him in a good light. They just did best possible light they could have. Like the whole
Right.
stuff you later on with CTE and everything else in Benoit, like they still don't throw him under the bus the way they should have. And stuff like that. And then they're like, and then following this, the WB and McMahon, they put in these new policies. And McMahon's like, well, I don't think there's any problem with any of this. I don't see anything that's this, causing this thing. But then, Nowinski's like, bro, look at all these findings.
That during that part, and it was nice to hear Christopher Nowinski on there talking about that. That was interesting. But the part that who really got buried on this, I feel like it was Stone Cold Steve Austin. His take on it's like he didn't, I don't believe in CTE, and if you're getting a bunch of concussions from wrestling, you're doing something wrong. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like that didn't come off very well. I don't think that painted him in a very good light.
I agree. Similarly, somebody that not just this episode, but in general, I think that somebody, but both, I didn't feel like this thing gave a lot of nice things to, but somehow also gave a lot of sympathy for, was Shane McMahon. Like Shane felt a lot, especially towards the last couple of episodes, like all he wanted was love from his dad that he never got. But this is why, because he did all these things. But that's all he wanted. It was love from his dad. And he never got it. And it was just odd. Like I had mixed feelings about Shane McMahon. Like he did all these crazy stunts to get out a boy from his dad that he never got.
How are you saying that painted Shane in a bad light?
I think some of the stuff that they talked about did paint him in a bad light. But at the same time also gave sympathy to. It was like a mixed bag. Like they didn't know what to do with Shane for me.
I don't see that they painted him in a bad light at all. I think there was a lot of sympathy, and it almost made it seem too like the same thing that Vince McMahon went with his father. He didn't have that relationship with his dad, and that was also a touching thing. Vince mentioned how his dad never told him he loved him until the day before he died. And that was the only time, by the way, that Vince McMahon really, he teared up and he was very emotional over talking about his dad, telling him he loved him and everything. And that was the only time he showed really any kind of emotion.
Yeah.
So the fact that it basically came full circle, and that's exactly the relationship he had with his son, and and Shane just wanted him, he just wanted to know he was proud of him, right? And he didn't get that until towards the end. There, so that was very interesting. What did so obviously they went into the steroid trial pretty deep, and they showed like footage of and the steroid trial was basically going on pretty much at the same time as the sex scandals of before with the Ring Boys.
Yep.
And all of that. I don't feel like they painted Pat Patterson in a very good light.
Not at all. They kind of do a bit of a bearing on Pat Patterson, and then you have like one person be like, "But I couldn't see Pat doing that. I never saw him doing that." After everyone's kind of like talked bad on Pat.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think it was Meltzer that said, so there's 3 people guilty and one of them's not guilty, and that person was Pat. But then you've got Tony Atlas, who basically is like, Pat, grabbed my pecker. And then the interviewer is kind of taken back. He's like, he what? And then Atlas just repeats it. It's like, he grabbed my pecker. Like it was the most like, it's like, oh. And the fact that he called it his pecker was very kind of funny. I mean, it's not a funny situation, but the way he presented that was kind of funny.
Agreed.
Um, and so that I thought it's like that's really sad though, because Pat's not here to defend himself, or anything like that. He's passed away, and I mean, I mean, we'll never know the full truth on that, but um. But the steroid trial's going on. They show Hulk Hogan on Arsenio Hall where he's interviewed about, have you taken steroids? And he blatantly lies and says, "Oh, I took it like once, when it was legal." And it's like, yeah, right, Hulk. And and Vince was mad at him because if he had just admitted and said, "Yeah, I did steroids," I'm not proud of it. I did it when it was legal and whatever. If he had, now it's illegal, so definitely, I'm against it now, or something along those lines. The steroid trial probably doesn't happen, but because he lied about it, they're like, we're gonna get him. We're gonna blow this thing open. So yeah, Hogan basically caused all of that. I mean, by lying.
Well, there was an interesting thing that they brought up too, right? So Hogan says that he got immunity for his part in the steroid scandal, for taking steroids illegally at the time and everything else from the feds by ratting out McMahon, right? And he says straight in there, he's like, "Oh, I told them whatever they wanted to hear, but when I was on trial, I totally surprised him because I told him something different." That actually does causes the deal for immunity to go out the window. So I'm not exactly sure how Hogan didn't get hit with that anyways and such. And you could theoretically be found to be purging yourself in one fashion or the other. So he should have been arrested at minimum.
Yeah, it's like I don't think there's a statute of limitations on it. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but I don't know.
And statute of limitations. Oh my god.
Oh my gosh, yes. Okay, so you want to cover that one?
Go ahead.
Okay, so Vince McMahon at one point when they were talking about the allegations by Rita Chatterton, who was a referee. She was the first women's referee for the WWF. Maybe professional wrestling at all. But she had alleged that Vince McMahon sexually assaulted her and raped her. And Vince denies it, but then he says, but even if it was rape, the statute of limitations had run out. And it's like, I could not believe he said that on camera.
Right.
Like, at the very least, like, by him saying that, like, at the very least, that makes him a despicable human being.
Well, the legal statute of limitations for being prosecuted does run out after, I think it's 7 years for most states. But civilly, you could be sued still without a statute of limitation. So Chadwick can totally go and sue him based off of this.
She did. I don't know if you saw the blurb at the end. They settled. So yeah, because they had lifted that, and she did do a civil case, and he settled out of court for that, which tells you all you need to know there.
Right.
But I just couldn't believe that, it's like the statute of limitations. It's like no remorse, no like, oh, I definitely didn't do it. Just that line there makes him look like he did it.
Yep.
So there's that. They also talked about David Schultz and the slap to the reporter. I forget his name. But basically, they talked about how he was going around like trying to get people to admit it, wrestling was fake, the reporter. And there's some people that said, oh, Vince said, hey, go take care of this guy. But they also kind of said, well, he didn't specifically say that, but it was implied.
You would take care of this guy.
What's that?
I wish somebody would take care of this guy.
Right. So which David Schultz goes out there, he asks him, isn't it fake? And he does the thing, protecting the business, slaps him hard. Like if you watch that footage that they show, like, holy crap. And the second slap was harder than the first slap. Because you had the first one, and then he's already rocked, and Schultz slaps him again. Actually ruptures his eardrum and everything. And he goes down. But I feel bad for David Schultz because he basically was used as a scapegoat there. Like WWF released him at that point and everything. And there's probably a lawsuit there, and all that, but it's just like, they should have, it shouldn't have fallen on him, at that point. I'm sure that there were a lot of wrestlers, even now, that applauded him for protecting the business like that. Because, that's what a lot of people would do nowadays. Maybe not so much now because it's not as big of a deal to protect it, but there's still people with that mindset.
Totally. I could totally see someone doing a bunch of bumps on a hardwood floor for a bunch of 10-year-olds to prove them that it's not fake. So,
hey, I only hurt myself, not others.
Or other people get rocked by a 6-year-old, just comes out of nowhere and punches them in the face.
Yeah. Yep. So and then they also show the Hogan thing where Hogan had the interviewer on the talk show. He said, hey, can you put me in a wrestling hold? And he puts him in a front face lock, and then just, you can see the guy going unconscious. Yep. And then Hogan lets it go and he just drops to the ground like limp. And
he turns it from a traditional front face lock into a full-on guillotine.
Yeah.
Because he reaches over and grabs on his bicep and lifts, which is what what causes him to choke out. And then he doesn't let him down lightly. He just kind of like lets him flop, and dude whacks his head and cracks his head open.
Yeah, you actually see the blood,
Yeah.
From it and all that. But yeah, kind of crazy. The things back then. There was a thing from Tony Atlas at one point, because he said, times were different back then and whatnot. And Tony says, that they did calls, or they did things that would be looked upon in today's society as some of the worst people walking the earth. And then he makes a statement where he says, we abused the hell out of women. All of us did, and he felt bad about it. Everything. It's like, that doesn't paint the business in the best light. A lot of it. I'm actually, even up until this point on this, I'm really surprised that Netflix aired this when they've got WWE coming to their network, to their streaming service, because this was not just a, hey, Vince McMahon, is no longer here and he was the problem and whatnot. It basically puts a negative slant on a lot of guys in the business that are still around too. Yep. So I don't know what they were thinking, honestly, with some of this stuff, but they even they somewhat briefly mentioned Jimmy Snuka and his girlfriend that died in they don't really go into too much depth on it, but they do mention it briefly.
And once again, our boy Tony Atlas is like, oh, I'm pretty sure McMahon had a hand in covering that up.
Right. It's like, geez. I'm surprised that they haven't gone after Vince for like things like that. Like I know they went, Snuka was on trial before he passed away.
Yeah.
So he never, they never convicted him, but it was heading that way. But I'm surprised they didn't, when that happened, I'm surprised they didn't go after Vince and try to prove that he covered it up, and protected him. I don't know. There's a lot of shady stuff going on there. And Bret Hart on here too. I would say he wasn't in the McMahon camp. He went pretty hard on a lot of Vince things.
He did, I guess. I mean, they surprisingly didn't do a lot with Bret. They talked about like a good chunk of this time when he was on there was dealing with the screw job and Owen, and then that was really it.
I mean, that was like a whole episode almost. Though they went pretty hard into the screw job and
one episode
and stuff.
Screw job,
huh?
I think if I remember right, one of the episodes was called Screw Job.
Yeah, it was, and it started with the Wendy Richter Mule thing, basically to set the tempo of, hey, this isn't the first time they screwed somebody. And Brett goes into the screw job again, talks about the punch and all of that. There's documentaries that go way deeper into that. There's a whole documentary on it, actually, called Wrestling with Shadows. If you haven't seen that one, go out and watch that. It's interesting. There was footage actually from that in this.
Well, funny enough, it's like how this is, where this was being taped or recorded when the stuff with the Wrestling with Shadows is the kind of same thing. That was actually being a different documentary when the screw job happened.
Yeah, exactly. Very similar. And they talk a little bit about then they get into basically the Monday Night Wars and Ted Turner signing Hogan and then Randy Savage and all of that. Lex Luger coming over.
Medusa.
Yeah, Medusa. Speaking of Medusa, by the way, I don't know if you heard, but she was asked to be in this and she turned it down.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because she thought it would be a hit piece on McMahon and she didn't want to be a part of it, which, it's interesting though. Yeah, and then let's see here. And then we've got an episode that's, let's see here. They spend actually a good amount of time on like the Monday Night Wars, the screw job. They cover a lot of that. They cover the Attitude Era, which again, they didn't have Vince Russo as part of this, which was like very glaring that they did not include him or even mention him as part of this. Because I mean, not only did he have a big part in the Attitude Era, like him or hate him, he had a big part in that, but he also had a big part in WCW's downfall, where WWF bought WCW. So there was a lot of that I'm really surprised they didn't mention him at all. But Trish Stratus was on this too, which was very interesting. She had some interesting stuff.
She was on it too on stuff like before she was even there, with the screw job and everything else. So
yeah, and yeah, she talks about the screw job and she dropped some F-bombs in there that I've never heard from her. So yeah, you knew that it was definitely not that it was uncensored in that way. Language was okay. And let's see here. Bonnie Hammer from the USA Network. They had her on there, which was really interesting too, because I've never heard from her at all. So hearing her perspective, like she even mentioned on the steroid trial that if Vince was found guilty, that they would have kicked him off the air.
Yep.
So that was very interesting to hear that even if somebody, was appointed to run the company, that they wouldn't have had the USA deal anymore. And so that was interesting. They do a video montage basically thing of where Vince is talking about how they don't, it's not so bad. It's still even during the Attitude Era, it was still family entertainment. And they're like, we don't have guns. And it shows the Brian Pillman incident where he has got the gun. He's like, we don't have like rape or something. They show a clip of something that's similar, where they're accusing somebody of it.
They showed the scene with H's cane in the coffin.
Right. And so, yeah, we don't show sex, and they, all of that stuff. And it's like, okay, so right away we know, they're, he's very, very hypocritical. Right. And he lies. Imagine that. They also talk about the Click too, by the way, which is the most fascinating story maybe ever in professional wrestling. Just you couldn't have talk about technically, like a shoot thing, but like long-term storytelling in the real world, where you've got Shawn and Triple H. And those guys, like, basically they were running things backstage, and getting people fired and all that, and now they're running the show now in current times. Like, that's bizarre to me. Just like they really are running the company now.
H is head of operations and creative, and Shawn is senior vice president of talent relations and runs creative for NXT.
Yeah, like who would have thought that, back in the day, and like that's insane.
Too, like in a way, in that same meeting with creative right now for NXT is Tommy Dreamer, who's the head booker and head of creative for TNA, and they have a working relationship. So Tommy's in a lot of those meetings to bring across, we can use these guys and this and this. I was talking with Tommy recently. He's our current DCW champion, and he was telling me all about it. It's just insane to think that Tommy Dreamer, Triple H, and Shawn Michaels are like the top tier right now in wrestling when it comes to stuff like that in running shows.
Yeah, it's like what a world we live in right now. What a time. And let's see here. They go into the the backstage antics of the Click too, and Degeneration X, and they talk a little bit about how Stone Cold went to ECW and how he went to basically how he became a star in the WWF with the Austin 316 promo, which
they went, he made it to ECW somehow, and he was going to be a big star. We knew he was going to be a big star, so we didn't do a whole lot with him. And then suddenly he was a huge star in WWE. Outside of like the year and a half, almost 2 years, he was there as
ringmaster. Right. Funny thing, Vince Russo tells a story about how the Austin 316 thing, so the day after he cuts that promo at King of the Ring, Vince Russo was writing for the magazine at the time, and he posts a picture of Austin 316 on the cover of the magazine, and Vince looks at it and says, what's Austin 316? I don't get it. And Vince is like, he said it in the promo last night. It's like, it's going to be huge. And Vince McMahon says, well, nobody's going to get it. Take it out, remove it. So if you think about it, like, McMahon almost didn't let the Steve Austin rise happen. He didn't get the Austin 316 thing. Like, if you think, once that promo happened, Stone Cold was off to the races. Really not. The very next pay-per-view after the King of the Ring was SummerSlam. Steve Austin is on the pre-show, the free-for-all pre-show he's not even actually on the pay-per-view. So McMahon did not get it initially until there were signs everywhere, and he could no longer, deny, that Austin was over. They talk about Mike Tyson, and Shane McMahon was a big part of the Tyson deal and all that.
Yep.
Let's see here. I love the Stephanie McMahon thing that they showed, the footage where Stephanie McMahon, when asked about Mike Tyson's baggage, and his, him being arrested for rape or something like that, and Stephanie McMahon says he hadn't been arrested for rape yet, though, when we did that, right? And you hear them saying, yeah, he had. And she didn't know that. So that was interesting.
100% a branding officer. Thinking back, it's like, oh, we were idiots.
Not too much of idiots, though, because the Tyson thing was huge at the time.
Okay.
Like, that's literally one of the big things why they were able to pop the ratings to get ahead of WCW. So because it was very much I remember there were non-wrestling fans and stuff that were watching WWE at that point because Tyson was cool at that point. Like, it was like he had legitimate badass, attached to his name.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he came on, there, like, everybody wanted to see that. And then let's see here. And then, the whole Mr. McMahon character in the heel turn, that was totally, by accident too. The screw job kind of caused it, but even then, Vince he thought he was the baby face in the whole situation.
Yeah.
But he wasn't.
Well, and you see it too, as he's doing more of the McMahon thing, the Mr. McMahon thing. Mm-hmm. He's enjoying being that heel, right? And I think it's such a native thing for him. And McMahon tries to talk around it and be like, oh, yeah, Mr. McMahon and myself are two different people completely. I'm never like that. And like every other person's like, oh, yeah, that's totally McMahon just turned up to 11.
Yeah, well, Vince McMahon basically said, he's asked, like, what similarities do you share with the Mr. McMahon character? And he's like, the character Mr. McMahon with me? None whatsoever. And then it goes to all the different people saying, no, that's exactly like how Vince is. And Bruce Pritchard is even there, like, he's, I've been on the other end of a Vince McMahon chewing me out, like he's, on, the Mr. McMahon character. And they mentioned that to Vince. And
he's like, oh, yeah, probably. Yeah.
Yep. Let's see. And then obviously the Yeah, Eric Bischoff or Dave Meltzer says Eric Bischoff's biggest mistake was not making new stars, while Vince was making new stars because he had to do it. That really was the downfall to WCW, I believe. It's that they were relying too much on the established stars
Yeah.
and not enough on. That's why a lot of people left, like Eddie Guerrero, the Radicals, Chris Benoit, Chris Chris Jericho, the Big Show. All those guys were leaving because of that. So they talk about The Rock and let's see here. Yada yada. A lot of it was a lot of it was a history of WWE. And let's see. Yeah, they talk about the Attitude Era. Oh yeah. So I'm gonna skip ahead here. After that, they're kind of they talk a little bit about the Ruthless Aggression Era. With John Cena. John Cena is interviewed in this as well. They mentioned the streak being broken, the Undertaker, losing to Brock Lesnar, and they do tell the story of that, about how Vince says, "All right, you're, Brock's going over tonight," but I don't really know if that had any place in it's little things like that felt so out of place in this documentary.
Well, they were talking about like swerving expectation and stuff like that during that part. But I agree. There was a lot of times where it just felt like, okay, why are we over here now?
Yeah, it was just like they'd throw in a little story. It's like, okay, that was a cool thing, but they're not really diving into that. So it was just like, of all the hours you left, on the cutting room floor, you're including this valuable stuff that doesn't even fit the narrative of the story for the most part.
Well, they mentioned during the making of the documentary that there's like 4 to 6 hours of tape of interviews specifically with Vince that they couldn't do because of Vince's voice. If you hear it through most of the stuff with him, he sounds like he's literally got a frog in his throat the whole time, and it was so bad at some points that they could not do anything with the tape.
Yeah, I would love to see the stuff that wasn't in this. They also talk a little bit about the Sable stuff, and Sable, suing them for sexual harassment, and all of that. And Vince basically is like, I don't remember that.
Yep.
It's like, I don't remember her suing us, but she came back to work. I know that. It's so, again, little things like that. And let's see, there was actually a really interesting thing towards the end with because the last episode, they're basically they go into the downfall of McMahon and all the allegations, everything that they mentioned how when the allegations came out, that he stopped wanting to do the interview, which is probably on behalf of his lawyers. Were probably telling him like, hey, no more, we have to, like, for PR purposes, we don't want you or we don't even want you asked about this stuff so you can be on camera doing that, because you're not on trial here. But let's see, I was actually really surprised that when they do go over the allegations, I was surprised that they mentioned Brock Lesnar by name.
Mm-hmm.
when they said, "Oh, and we, it came out that it was Brock Lesnar," because we had heard like, "Oh, former UFC fighter," and everyone assumed it was Brock Lesnar and stuff. But the fact that they actually came out and said, "Oh, it was Brock Lesnar," and then they said, "Yeah, you know, he was basically a part of this."
Well, they
There's
didn't
no-
where they never specifically says that he did anything wrong.
Yeah, but they do mention how he watched the videotapes of her.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
he saw pictures and videotapes that there was a joke at some point about adding it to his contract, like stuff like that. But at no point did they ever say that like he did anything wrong and stuff like that. And like in Brock's defense, and this is a slight defense, the slightest of defenses. Please understand, I'm not taking his side. I'm not agreeing with anything that happened. But all that they stated was that McMahon showed a video of a girl he was having a relationship with, and that was it, right? And that he talked about adding her to his contract. That was as far as they admitted on this video.
do you think though that like public opinion, right? It's like they see that they're going to, like, if you're not a wrestling fan and you're watching this and you see, Brock Lesnar's thing there, and they mention him,
I do not want to see Lesnar's thing. It may be the next big thing, but I don't want to see it.
But but there's no way they can bring him back now. I don't think. I don't there would be a bit major backlash. I think public opinion, he's guilty.
Well, yeah, like, and even just like the description that was given about him, that we went with the assumption it was him. It's the same thing, right? Because there's only two people that could have followed, like a former UFC champion who wrestled with WWE. You had, I guess, three. So you had Shamrock, you had Brock Lesnar, and you had Cain Velasquez. You had three options it could be, and the most likely was Brock. That's kind of why I brought this up, that technically they didn't say anything that he had done whatsoever. The allegations are there. And when it comes to sexual assault of any variety or this or anything like this, it is sadly guilty till proven innocent. And even twice as bad in the public forum. So yeah, I agree. I think he's, for all intents and purposes, screwed forever returning to WWE, or at least anytime soon.
Right.
There, like 10, 15 years from now, can he make the Hall of Fame? Possibly, if he's not acquitted for anything.
Right.
He could totally do that, but I don't see him returning anytime soon.
Yeah. They do, when they're going over the allegations and everything at the end, they mention basically about how there were, the lawsuit claims that there was a cover up, within WWE and all that. I cannot believe though that they left that in there, because the non-wrestling fan, they hear that, they're going to think the whole company is crooked. They're going to think that it's the whole company. And so I don't know if that helps the whole thing with them, Raw being on Netflix. I don't think that got them new viewers.
I agree. I think that, especially with this last episode, it does paint WWE in a worse light than it could have. But I think in a similar fashion, it hopefully will get more people to do research and see what's going on, because they do mention that a lot of higher ups were let go due to this, right?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't name names, but there was a dozen people let go involved somehow with this. From of course McMahon retiring and John Laurinaitis, but
Mm-hmm.
several other names that were brought in too, of people who were let go at the time that were executives and people that were in power. So though this is messy and it does get brought up as the light that this may still be something that's happening, I want everyone to understand that they've gone massive strides for correcting this kind of thing. Um, I have had the opportunity of knowing several people who are both in the wrestling industry as well as in the WWE company that I can tell you on their behalf that this is not the same WWE they had even 2 years ago. So I hope everyone takes that and continues to watch the product, because wrestling's in the best place it has been in 2 decades.
Yeah. It's an exciting time. It's sad some of this stuff had came out and everything. But I do want to bring up, how Bruce Pritchard was interviewed after in this documentary, and he was like, they're like, so you saw the first, few episodes or whatever. What did you think? And he's like, I hated them. They sucked, because he's like, it's basically a hatchet job. It's a burial of Vince, and it's like you're not looking at any of the positives. And it's like, what positives are we missing? It's like the human side or whatever, and he talks about how Vince, took care of him and his wife who has cancer, and all that. But that doesn't excuse, like, because somebody can be, can take care of somebody but not be good to somebody else. Those things, I mean, it happens all the time, right? It's like, well, they were good to me. Well, that's your experience, but sometimes other people don't experience the same thing, and they're not treated the same.
There are very few people in this world who are truly good or truly evil.
Right.
There are these levels of gray, right?
Mhm.
And I mean, I can tell you that I've been a royal dick to certain people in my life. I try not to be, but I have.
You're okay. I forgive you. I'm just kidding.
When I was dating back before my wife and I've had a number of fairly unexcusable things that I've done to people. Never physical violence or anything like that, but in the way I've treated people or end relationships. You could totally see that as a dick. Now, this isn't the same level, but my point being is, for the most part, I try to be a nice person, but I have bad in my past. Everybody does. Bruce Pritchard's right. He probably a great person to him, probably a great person to like Hogan or other people when they were in his good graces.
Right.
If he had the opportunity to manipulate you to get what he wanted, it sounds allegedly like that's what he did.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I wish we could get the real stories. I mean, not that any of these stories weren't real, because they were, but I wish, there's probably hundreds of other stories that could have been told and could have been included here. I would love somebody else to tackle a documentary on it and dig up more stuff. I think that we actually probably will get that, because the documentary did really well, viewers wise so far. And so I can see others wanting to tackle, a documentary on it and uncovers different stuff. Because you see that with documentaries all the time. Like if you like want to Google a particular subject, or like look up on Hulu or Netflix or anything like that, you're going to find multiple documentaries on the same subject. I mean, look at the Menendez brothers and stuff. How many documentaries are out there covering the exact thing?
Oh yeah, and so many like crime shows that do rehashing all that now because they're about to come out with that Menendez thing on, I think it is Netflix, that they're doing a TV, or I don't know if it's episodic or if it's just a show, but they're doing a thing on Netflix. So there's a ton of stuff bringing that up right now too. But now we've gone through this, let's go ahead and just kind of give our final thoughts on the whole of this documentary. What did you think?
I found it was a really like breezy 6 episodes, 6 hours or whatever it was. I binge watched them in like 2 days. And so, which is, at an hour a piece, that's 6 hours, with no commercials. I feel like, as far as like,
or 2 Raws.
Right, exactly. I wouldn't sit through a 3-hour Raw, but I sat through 6 hours of this. So from a like an I don't want to say entertainment, but like from
intriguing,
intrigue, and it kept my interest. It was good. Did I know most of the stories? Yes, but it was told by different people, or we never heard Vince's take on some of the things, so that was interesting. And that's part of the reason why multiple documentaries come out about different subjects or true crime or different things, because you might hear an interview from someone that never was interviewed for it before, and you're hearing their perspective on where they were. Like, look at 9/11 stuff, how many documentaries and different things, because you hear a different interview of where I was, during that, or my experience during that. So overall though, like, I thought it was both good and bad for the wrestling industry. I think it was good in the fact that we're seeing more mainstream stuff. Like there's interest in telling these stories, these real life stories about professional wrestling, to the mainstream audience. But I feel like it's bad for wrestling because there's not a lot of positive documentaries. And for the first little bit of this documentary, it was mostly positive. But there was also a lot of negative. I don't think you watch this documentary and come out of it thinking, Vince McMahon's a good guy.
No, not at all. And for the most part, I agree with it. I do feel, though, it is kind of the tale of 2 documentaries, because it does, like, the first probably 3 to 3.5 episodes were kind of a fluffish piece. I mean, there was stuff in there of putting it down, but they kind of did it in a more positive light. It wasn't until the last few episodes you really saw the heel that is McMahon in real life, allegedly. And the interesting thing for me in this is seeing how much of McMahon, Mr. McMahon, is in Vince McMahon, right? And it was kind of an interesting take to see that he's not different behind the scenes per se. The other aspect to it that was interesting, and I knew 90-ish% of the stuff that came on here, maybe call it 80-ish, 85-ish%. but I knew a good chunk of what was in this the stories. But there was a few in there, like the Richter thing I hadn't heard before. That. So it was interesting to hear that from point of views from other people as well as what's out there. But there were so many stories that I would have loved to heard. His take on the plane ride from hell, even.
Oh yeah,
Stuff like that. Like I honestly felt like 6 episodes was not enough.
how could it be?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and but sadly that's all we're ever going to get with McMahon.
I don't think he's ever going to come out and do an interview telling more.
No. So I'm surprised he did this.
The only other like stuff we may get is if they air the Vince McMahon trial. You know, if we get that, then we'll hear testimony of all these different people and stuff. Now that I'll watch. If they put that on court TV, that's going to be like must-see television.
Oh yeah, definitely. But with that being said, guys, I want to hear what your guys' thoughts were on all of this. Reach out to us on social media at Be Hero Media on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter. You can also go to our BeHeroMedia.com website and get all the information you want to know about us and where to find us and listen to these episodes right away. So please let us know your thoughts on this documentary. What was good, bad, or otherwise? Was there an interesting story you never heard? Reach out to us and let us know. And then lastly, as we do every show, we're going to go ahead and talk about the upcoming shows for Devotion Championship Wrestling. And we're going to start off with our upcoming show, October 5th, which is Saturday, the day after this airs. And that's going to be Halloween Bash in Salt Lake City, and that's going to be at Light Tree Studios, 70 South, 740 West. That's going to be a fantastic show. So please go and hit that one up. And then following that, we will be doing the Taco and Margarita Festival in Salt Lake on October 12th. And then later that night, we'll be in Ogden doing Tussle Time at Kamikazes. So we'll be able to have double dose of wrestling with us in October 12th in just a week away. And then lastly, you'll be able to see us right back here at Light Tree Studios November 2nd for Painsgiving, another great show. You get all the information for all of that great wrestling at Devotion Championship Wrestling on Facebook and Instagram, at DCW Salt Lake City on Twitter, and then Devotion Wrestling on TikTok. And then lastly, for anyone that's in the Arizona area, October 19th, myself as well as several of my cohorts from Devotion Championship Wrestling will be at Arizona Championship Wrestling, ACW, and we'll be there October 19th. Follow me on my social media at Mike Burke DCW on all of the social medias to get information on that great show. All right, Psycho. Oh, and of course, you can reach out to Psycho at Psycho Wrestling on Facebook. Sorry about that. Almost forgot you.
It happens.
Is there anything else, Psycho, before we end this?
No, it was interesting. That's probably the closest we're going to get to talking about Vince McMahon again, or at least until the trial, or there's other documentaries, I guess. But
or he's happy to
yeah. But yeah, it was interesting.
That it was. Well, guys, for the rest of Be Hero Media, he has been Psycho, I have been me, and this is us tapping out. Have a great night, guys.